Right, we're really entering the final stretch now in terms of painting. What I've decided to do is take a little look at the wooden section here and try and create a little bit more of a relief or wood effect to try and make it stand out a little bit more and just lose some of this sort of dull flatness that we've ended up with. So that's going to be job number one. Job number two is to tackle the walls. I marked these out with pen. I've put the blue paint on and basically I've lost that lining, that definition. So I'm going to try and recreate that. But I thought I'd just try and demonstrate what I normally do for a bit of wood grain. So what I've done here is taken the next one in the triad for my brown. So this is a mahogany brown Vallejo 846. This is the partner to the flat brown. And these two are the top two colours in my brown triad. The third one I use is a much darker one, which is a black brown, which is 822. That was too dark for the model and wouldn't have really looked realistic. So just going to pop a little bit of the mahogany brown into a pot. Take my normal brush and I'm going to try and do this sort of upside down. But what we normally do, what I normally do, is just create a little lined impression going down the wood pieces. Sometimes putting almost like a circle in to represent a knot. But trying to just give a general impression that there might be some grain here. And whilst that may not look particularly great now, when it's drying, or sorry, when it's dried, as long as we stay away from the sort of these recessed areas, it will have the effect of lifting the model and just create a bit of a subtle effect. This dries out a little bit. Well, this will dry darker than it appears here. We'll end up with a very faint lining on the wood grain, on the wood, reflecting a bit of grain effect. And that's really what I'm going to look for. So I'm going to carry on doing this. For me personally, I'm going to tip this upside down or onto the side, sit it on my lap, and then draw the paintbrush in this kind of action across the front. Find that a lot easier. But you get the idea from this sort of overlay or this sort of illustration. And then I'll show you what it looks like, and we'll maybe contrast that with one of the other sections, see what you think. Okay, so here's a bit of a view of the plain untreated, if you like, or unpainted brown, and then this sort of relief that I've created here, which probably looks a bit crazy close up and on the camera, but in reality, if you step back, that's actually creating quite a nice impression. I will give you a longer distance view, but if we sort of rotate round, you'll see that obviously the rest of the wall itself is now looking a bit bland, shall we say, and it really doesn't have, excuse the noise, the same sort of reliefing that we've got here. So I'm pretty pleased with that. It will, as it dries, as I say, darken off a little bit. I've left the sort of broad sort of construction or support lines in there, which I think will help to, you know, again lift the overall impression. So yeah, carry on to complete the rest of it now. Oh, just one tip before I close off the camera: it's best to have the it's best to have the paint fairly watery and to take sort of small bits and let the brush kind of do the work, just dragging it along. If you get a little blip, that's great. Just turn it into a bit of a knot. And actually, I don't think you can go wrong here in terms of irregular pattern. I've tried to go down, well, I've tried to go lengthways with the grain just to have some sort of consistency of approach. It's obviously created a contrast here, but again, looking at that from a distance, what we're trying to do is just get the effect of the wood, and that's actually from about, what's that, for about 1.5 feet, that's actually quite a good effect. So I'll carry on, complete the rest of it, and let you guys have a look. Welcome back. As you can see, I've put the wood grain effect on all of the planking. Hopefully you'll agree that it does provide some sort of indication of relief. I think actually the camera is quite deceiving in that it's making it look a lot bolder and a lot more stark a contrast than it actually is. If I try and pan the camera out a little bit, hopefully you can see that from a distance that just lends an air of relief to it without making it look quite as garish as perhaps it might first appear. So I'm actually very pleased with the way it's gone. Again, it's one of those things that's taken a fair amount of time. I think I've got one act of madness left. I've taken a look at this plain roofing that we've got here, and I don't like it. I've taken a look at the historical castles themselves. What we ended up with, or what we should end up with, is a ridge line exactly the same way as that we've got over here. So we need to, well, I think I need to put my cocktail stick ridge line along the top, and then put the edges down in the same way that I've done for these sections. So that's the last thing I'm going to do before tackling the base. So I'll put the sticks on, use the same distance that I've got approximately here to line out the tiles. Hopefully that will provide a much nicer finish. I'm also going to address this little section here where we've got a dipping in. And again, I think, you know, the relief that we get from putting the cocktail sticks along will really help to lift the edge and perhaps it make it not look quite so plain. Similarly with the roof line here, I'm going to follow the same principles as I've had previously. Hopefully it won't take too long, but obviously I'll do that work in the same way that I did the roof sections and let you guys take a look. Welcome back. As you can see, I've now fitted some little cocktail sticks all the way along to try and recreate the same design as our roof. Just a little bit of a tip: if you get one that's a little bit too long or has perhaps dropped a bit, just get your snips and remove them. I've not found too much trouble here with either the gluing or the sort of solidity of the fit, as it were. So what I'm going to do now is revisit with our Vallejo Prussian Blue 965 and shake the pot off camera, and then we'll return to doing a bit of painting. Just clear the nozzle so that we can actually get some paint out. Oh, there we go. Put that to one side. So I've got back to a larger size 1 brush, and I'm just going to run over this. I will go back obviously and do the blue wash that we had previously on the roof sections. But I'm just going to try and coat that in, get the sides done, where if we've got any sort of gluey residue, that will be nicely hidden. And actually, not sure quite how that's coming out on camera, but from a up close perspective, we're already improving the look as far as I'm concerned. There's probably what I've done here is I've gone for roughly 1 centimetre width between the the ridge lines, or in our case the cocktail sticks. Possibly an argument for going slightly closer than that, but actually, apart from the odd angle that I think you're getting from the camera facing down, hopefully you'll agree with me that this is starting to help create a more of a consistent theme between the roof line. Just grab that. Yeah, the roof line and obviously the front wall section. So I'm going to carry on running around the walls with this paint. Then I'll put the same dark wash on that we used on the roof section with our ink, and then we'll go from there. See you soon. Okay, so I finished applying the base coat. Just a reminder, I've used the lighter Prussian blue rather than the dark version. I'm going to mix the dark version with the ink when we come to actually run over it, and hopefully that will then bring it back to exactly the same sort of colour tone as the roof section. However, whilst I'm waiting for that to dry, I thought I'd just show you what I intend to do with the base. Now normally, if it was a figure base, this would be quite a dark colour. I usually use a Vallejo English uniform as my undercoat. However, because I used this piece, very roughly during a game, and I put this, quite frankly, amateur base on, I thought I'd just see what the effect would be if I was to use this as the base. You can see the kind of contrast that I'm looking for with the actual gaming table, so it's not that far off. But what I want to do is obviously put some relief on here. So I've got some War World Scenics basing glue here. Now this is quite runny. Now it does take a little bit more caution to use, but it's actually a lot nicer because it's runny. It's a slightly watered down PVA. It doesn't have the same tendency to warp bases, and that's something that I'm quite keen to avoid. Obviously here, having taken a lot of care to align the base board so that any sort of warping was down rather than up, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to start by trying to put some relief around this first section, just following a rough outline. And what I'll do is I'll get that's probably enough for a quick trial. I'll get my size 1 brush again and just spread it out a little bit. I'm going to go up to the edge, but not, it doesn't matter if you go sort of slightly higher on the edge, because obviously we want to make this look natural, and any sort of gaps, I'm fine with us filling those in. I'm trying to keep this water section lower than the obviously surrounding relief. So that's the only area that I'm going to go a little bit more careful on. And as I say, this will be a section that I'm just trying, whilst we're waiting for everything to dry. I'll come back and take a little look at it, and if I like the look of it, I will continue that on. If not, I haven't invested too much time in something that I want to change. I wouldn't normally do this at the front of the castle. However, A, it's easier because of the way I've got the camera aligned, and B, I'm fairly confident that this will be something that I want to stick with, and I'd like to see the effect on the sort of front facing part of the castle, hence why I'm doing it this way. Now I may wash over this finish, but there we go. So I've got a decent amount of coverage everywhere. I'm just going to push that back so that I give myself a little bit of space around the edge here, because now what I'm going to do is grab a Jarvis sand and stone mix, which I've just for convenience put into a box, into a pot. I'm just going to spread that very loosely over the section that I've tried to paint. And I'm just going to leave that to dry whilst the rest of the paint dries. And when we come back, we'll take a little look at what effects we've ended up with. Hi, right, I'm happy that the roof section has dried sufficiently for us to put the wash on. So I thought I'd just remind myself, as much as anyone else, what we're doing with that wash. So I'm taking a small receptacle, I'm putting in a few drops of Quick Shade Dark Tone. Primarily it's about this blue ink. So I'm going to use the blue ink, the dark tone. I'm going to use a little bit of the mixing medium. I do find that does add a bit to it, so just make sure that the receptacle you're using is nice and clean and dry. And whilst the Jarvis mix is still drying, we'll put a few drops in here. I'm going to mix quite a bit actually. Bit of the dark tone, take the coloration down a bit, and then obviously the primary shade is the ink itself. And yes, I'm using quite a lot there. This should mix quite well and cover quite well. If you end up with too much, I have on occasion returned the surplus to the bottle, and perhaps we'll show you how you can do that. But you just take the lid off, pop this out with a pair of pliers or similar, and then you can pour back into it. That's also the way to add some water or some additional fluid if you want to make it last a bit longer. But here all I'm doing is exactly what we did on the roof sections, just running some of this across the entire surface, but obviously hoping that it will cling to those recesses and try and give us a bit of relief. I have to say this hasn't worked quite as well as the upper sections in terms of the proper roof sections themselves. It's probably something to do with how far apart I've got the cocktail sticks and also how long they are. But I still think on the gaming table, when we put the roof sections on, this is going to be the best way to blend the walls in with that upper section. So this probably won't take too long, but I'll just drop the camera and then show you what it looks like when it's finished. Okay, so the wash has been put on. I've noticed a couple of small areas where I've flicked some ink on the surface of the walls. Might just run down that with a little bit of paint there. Not sure it's going to be too much to worry about. So now while that's drying, I thought I'd have a little look at this section down here that we glued earlier. Probably haven't given it quite as long as I would normally have given it, but I'm now just going to tip this up onto one side. Oops, like this. Just knock that off a little bit. Take a little look at what we've got here in terms of the finish. So actually you can see that that's created a nice definition around the pool. It's not fully dry yet, but certainly I'm getting the general feeling that that is something I'm going to be happy with. So let's just move the castle to one side a moment. Let me return the surplus sand back to the pot. For reuse, as I said, this is a Jarvis sand and stone mix, which I find a really useful all-round blend. And hopefully, what we'll do now, we turn this top base. We might just brush that off a bit. bit more to collect later on. This just helps to raise the castle itself off of the working surface. So what I'm going to do now is just complete the basing that I started earlier with the whoa, you can see how runny it is. I don't know if you saw that flick out there just because I opened the top. Not worry too much about that. That will dry quite nicely. I'm going to return to using the Warworld Scenics basing glue, and we're just going to complete going round in the various sections. And obviously what I'll do on all these edges is again same approach that I had earlier, which is to take the larger brush, run up to the edges, not worry too much about, as I say, the edges that touch the castle, because that will help just tie the whole thing in. Probably got a little bit too much glue there, but never mind. It's not really that we need to be too even with it. I just don't want it sort of hanging over the edges when it comes to it. So what I'm doing is taking, if I've got any surplus, I'll just take that around. Some people base the edge of the board. I'd rather not do that. Just going to run my finger gently around there. And whilst that's still very wet, get the sand and stone mix. And just continue to work our way around the base. And then I'm going to give this a good sort of 24 hours to dry, so that we don't, when I come to put some top washes over, etc., we won't have any problems with this still being wet underneath. So just continue to work that around. So don't be put off by how watery this glue is. It works really well. So much so that when I do PVA on bases now, I tend to make sure it's a little bit more watery than normal, and it just helps prevent some of that warping that you occasionally get when you're doing MDF figure basing. So yeah, I'll just continue to do this section by section. Put the sand on. Once it's dry, come back and show you the progress. Hi. One last feature I think before I do anything with this base that's drying is I've been considering whether to varnish or protect the painted sort of finish. I think I'm going to do it. I think there's a good argument for perhaps using a varnish or something like that, given that it's a wood base. But my go-to matte varnish for figures is the AK Ultra Matte Varnish. You will not get a better varnish than this. In my opinion, it works better than any sort of spray that I've tried, including some of the more traditional choices. It certainly works better than, shall we say, other manufacturers, and it provides a really, really genuinely matte finish. It's probably not as durable as obviously going for gloss or for varnish, but I think here what I'm looking for is just something to help lock the paint, in, provide a little bit of durability for a gaming piece that will see, you know, some sort of activity, but isn't going to be sort of heavily used. I'm going to start by varnishing these brown bits in particular. I may then come round to doing the courtyard, and I'll have a think about what I want to do about the the other sections, but certainly I'm going to start with the wood sections, maybe go down to some of the brickwork, but I'll do the brown first and then let you take a little look. So again, just getting my normal sort of receptacle for the paint. I've given this a good shake off camera. It's fairly obviously watery, so it's going to run quite well. Get a fairly big brush. Nothing dramatic going on here other than we're just going to put some paint on all of these some varnish on all of these surfaces, just to try and get a as I say, just to kind of really, I tend to think of it as locking the paint in really more than anything else, but it will obviously provide a little bit of additional coverage and protection, and I'm very happy with it being a matte finish because this is wood. So I'm just going to, for now, run round all of these. Oops, sorry, just realised the camera's been going in and out. But I'm going to run round all of these sections with a matte varnish, trying not to let it drip or anything like that. It's sort of sunk in there, which I'm quite happy with. And then, you know, you can see that obviously it's a glossy effect at the moment. That will genuinely dry very matte. I'm going to do the woodwork on the upper side, upper sections first, probably the stairway as well, and the doors. I'm not so inclined about doing the roof, but I may very well just do the golden pieces on the top. But this is all just to keep me occupied while the base is drying. I'll probably go down and do this base at some point, but not for the time being, whilst obviously we've got the sand drying below it. So I'll just finish off doing the upper woodwork, let it dry, and then show you guys what it looks like. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me again, for sticking with the video this far. As you can see, this is now a pretty much dried base. I've shaken off the loose sand. I haven't attacked this water feature yet. We'll come back to that a bit later. Now the objective is to try and get this to blend in with the gaming table. Now I'm going to use it predominantly with this sort of teddy bear fur skirmish based sort of tabletop that I've got here. So obviously I've got the original acrylic paint, the different shades of green that we used, and I'm sure I will be using those a bit later. However, what I'd like to do is just tone down the whole base. Now I've used this on other videos. This is a Bacchus sort of basing material, basing part of the basing set, and you can see there's a bit of pigmentation that settles in it, and if you give it a shake, you're going to get a nice overall brown colour, which I'll show you in a minute. However, what I'm thinking is I want this to be particularly watery, so I'm just going to add a little bit more water to the mix. Take the lid again and just give it a bit more of a shake. And then I'm going to start to apply this using a large brush. And it's just going to tone the whole thing down a little bit. So don't necessarily do this with figure bases. It depends on sort of what scheme I'm going for. You know, if it's a sort of desert Mediterranean type scheme, I'll just decorate the top. But for this sort of backdrop, I think just putting this on to begin with is just going to create that slightly darker effect that's going to make it easier for me then to work with, to blend into this this surface. So the goal here is to try and get the very watery basing sort of cover, that's the right phrase, to sort of seep into the sand effect. And it will look brown to begin with, but it will, as it dries, lighten up. As you saw, I've put a fair amount of additional water in it to make it somewhat lighter. And then this will create a really nice surface for us to dry brush on, to put some flock on, maybe to put some self-adhesive tufts, and really just begin to work on making sure that the surface is as natural looking as we can make it, but also one that fits in with the general theme of the baseboard or the surface that I'm going to use most of the time for these skirmish games. So I'm just going to carry on working my way around, knocking off any sort of loose bits of stone as we go, and then obviously I'll let you guys see the next stage when this is a little bit more dry and ready to work on. Hi there. As you can see, this is now dry. We've got a slightly, well, I mean obviously it's brown, but you can see already that there is a slight sort of variation in colour, which is great because that reflects where the pigment has sort of seeped into the sand at a lower level, or the board itself. So now the goal is to try and blend it with some of this sort of look here in terms of coloration. So here we've got a mixture of different greens. Obviously we've got this lighter colour underneath, and I've had a little look in the paint sort of box as it were about what we could use. I've got some Bacchus top coat and base coat here. There is a middle one in between, but I'm looking at these two as an option for trying to recreate this sort of lighter colour that we've got over here. Not sure if that comes through very well on the camera. This one's too dark, but this one is a little bit lighter than perhaps I'd like, although it does really reflect the colour quite well. So what I'm going to try and do is do an initial sort of dry brush with predominantly this top coat, and then a little bit of the base coat to darken it. So I'll just mix that up, excuse me, put that into a pot, and we'll see how we go. Okay, so I've got a colour that I'm pretty happy with. I've taken a really old, dry, flattish brush, and I'm going to take a little bit of the paint, just work at it here. I tend to use a little bit of cardboard, and then what we'll start to do, sorry, I'm using the cardboard just to take off the surplus paint there. And all I'm looking to do is just drag the brush across the surface very lightly, just to pick up some of this lighter pigmentation. And how effectively, how much wet or how much paint you leave on the brush, it's going to dictate how much we transfer obviously to the surface. I'm not going to do that close to the edge of the water area, simply because that will obviously help create more definition, but also will probably be more appropriate given that I'm going to put some plants around the edges here as part of the overall sort of scenic dressing. Now hopefully you can see the difference between this section and this section, and I'm really trying to go lightly at this stage because at this stage we're just trying to pick up that undercurrent of this sort of lighter colour in the base. Doesn't really matter if you do too much. You can go back over it with your sort of whatever medium you've used to darken the surface, or indeed if you've started with a darker mix in the first instance, you shouldn't have really any too much sort of difficulty in doing this. And obviously choose a small section first if you're not comfortable with the way that this is going. But I think, you know, just in terms of general lightening, I'm very happy with that as an approach. So I'm going to carry on doing that and then let you know what the next stage is. So that was a fairly quick process, just running around putting that dry brushing on. The next stage, and that's something I've done loads of times before, so you know, fairly confident about that process. This is a little bit new for me in that what I'm going to try and do is take some of the colours that I used for the teddy bear fur preparation, and try and see what they look like as a dry brush in a similar way to this. I think it's going to be challenging because we're trying to recreate this sort of flecked appearance, and it may be that I just default to using some flock, and I've been looking through the bits box in terms of the flock colours that I've got, and I've got this sort of static grass mix here, which, as you can see, does offer quite a nice little blend with the actual underneath surface that I'm trying to put the board on. This is actually, let's have a quick look, just what's a medium green. I think I've left obviously the card in there to help me understand which one it is, but it's a 2mm flock which is labelled medium green. I think it might be a Woodland Scenics because it's got that same colour, but don't hold me to that one. So that's my sort of fallback, is to come back and have a little look at that. But I thought, just as a bit of an experiment, I would try some of this colour first, and I'm going to start with the this one here. And it's been a while since the board was prepared, so I don't know if you can see that, but I've got a fair amount of residue stuck there. When I did the teddy bear fur top, I obviously was outside for most of it, and it's quite an interesting process when you're sort of brushing it through. So I've obviously put a couple of those bits there. I've obviously not closed it properly when I did it the first time round. This one is just an olive green. The first one was labelled as just green earth. I'm going to try a couple of these couple of squirts of that paint each side. I'll return to my dry brush, and let's try a little bit of green and see what we think in terms of whether that helps to take the surface. I'm not sure you can see that, but it's very subtle. So if I was to pick a few areas out like this. Okay. If I try and do a little bit more green near the edge of the waterline, I'm thinking that might help just lift. Okay. I don't know what you think there, but this is not actually too bad. So just trying to occasionally get a little bit more coloration there, and I actually don't mind the sort of outlining effect that I'm currently giving it on that water feature. If we take it back a little bit from the water feature, that might look a little bit more naturalistic. Okay. Okay, so before I go too far, I might just clean off the dry brush. Try this olive green that we've got here. Just take the edge off that. Okay, now that is a lot more subtle. Again, it's just taking the edge off of the coloration. Okay. Okay, so for now, what I'm going to do is just continue that very sort of gentle blending of greens around the board before moving on to put some flock on. But I'll finish that off now and then come back and show you the overall effect. Here we are. I've obviously just really pretty much spotted the surface as I showed you earlier. I've left perhaps a little bit darker a little bit more pigment in certain areas, just to make it a little bit darker. It does have a bit of a mottled effect at the moment, rather than a sort of blended effect. So now I'm going to have to start introducing some of the flock to try and create some larger areas that will help to tone it in with the surface. So I'm going to return to my basing glue again, give it a bit of a shake, and in the same way that I've done before, just introduce, oops, I think that's the second time that's happened. So you can really see how watered down the basing is. Sorry, how watered down the glue is. So let's try and avoid doing that again. Again, I don't want to concentrate too much on the water feature, because that will perhaps sort of over exaggerate the effect of it. I'm just going to try this for a moment, just spread that out a little bit. Try and keep the irregular sort of nature of the pattern, even with a few little gaps in between. That can look quite good sometimes. And this is only a 2mm flock that I'm going to put on here, so we don't have to worry too much about, you know, a flock applicator or something like that. And I am going to come back with a bit more dressing in terms of some tufts, but let's just take a small amount of this medium green, which is, I think, tonally quite closely matched the underlying teddy bear fur. And obviously it will, and we're just going to tap that down slightly. And of course that needs time to dry. But even on that little section there, hopefully you can see that that's starting to create a nice effect in terms of blending the feature in with the underlying board. In fact, I think I'm probably going to need to be a little bit more dense with the coverage. It'd be nice if I stopped flicking the glue on the actual model itself. So let's just split that out just slightly, so that we've got perhaps a more dominant green colour than brown colour. I think given the texture and overall coloration of the base, that's probably going to look better in the long run. Okay. Obviously I'm putting on a fair amount here. If we tip this off over a piece of newspaper, we'll recover most of any sort of excess block that I've placed on. Move that to one side. As I say, the goal here is to really start to introduce green as a fairly dominant colour, and I'm actually quite pleased with that progress, because as I said, I will be going back and targeting some of these other areas with some tufts. So I'll carry on doing that all the way around the board. I'll then give it plenty of time to dry, knock off the excess and show you what it looks like. Thanks for joining me again. As you can see, I've removed the excess flock from the surface here. The only thing I would say is, to the natural eye, this is a little bit tone lighter than I was hoping to achieve on the board. So what I've done is gone back to the bits box and I've retrieved a Woodland Scenics blended turf. This is a pack I've had around for a long time. It's a green blend. But what I'm going to do, I don't know if that's easy to see, but we'll put some of this on, because when I look tonally at this on the surface, it's creating a much nicer tie-in. So I'm not unhappy with what I've done here. It's just that I think I could get a better colour blend. So I'm going to revisit some of the basing by just adding in some of the darker blended turf, and I think that will help to not only put a more green dominant coloration in, but will also help to tie it in with the board. So I'm just going to repeat the process that we started earlier by spreading a little bit of this around, not worrying too much if I actually go into the existing block. There we go. And I'll just grab the blended turf. And this is a slightly thicker mix altogether, so it will raise the profile a little bit as well, which won't hurt. And again, I'll just tap this off over a piece of newspaper and collect all the surplus after giving it a little bit of time to dry. So I've got high hopes that this combination is going to be particularly sort of pleasing when we finally assess it on a clear board set up ready for gaming. But I'll carry on doing that in the same manner that I did before and come back and let you guys have a look. Right, so I think we're very nearly there. I'm very pleased with the darkening effect that I've got from using the blended turf. We've still got a lot of brown, but we'll come back to that in a moment. I found out the paint, which is just a simple Rustin's satin chocolate coloured paint that I used to create this very dark sort of effect on the roads of the playing surface. It's got a few bits on it. I'm going to give this a proper good shake off once we've finished the build. But what I thought I'd do now is just grab a little pot, take a small amount of this paint, which is, as you can see, is quite thick, and I'm not going to use any more than that. Put that to one side, put the lid back on a little bit later. What I'm going to do is get a big brush and add a lot of water to this. And I'm going to try and create an ink type effect that will just darken some of this brown that I've got on the actual base. Put that to one side. Let's give this a stir, see what we think of this. I think if I just test that a little bit on just an old base, you can see the sort of effect that that's bringing. And I'm just going to lightly use that in a couple of areas, maybe just a little bit more water. Just give that another little stir. And I'm just doing this because I want to have the different elements of the base appear in our sort of castle backdrop, as it were, and just pick out a couple of those areas. And again, I might just add a bit of darkening to the section where we've got the moat, as it were. Let's go around this area a little bit. And I just think tonally, I'm taking the edge off the lighter brown colour, and I think in the long run that's going to suit the model a little bit better. Okay, so we are really nearly there with this build. As you can probably imagine, it's taken me days of effort spread over a considerable period of time. We're probably up to about a month now in terms of overall elapsed time. Obviously some of that is about letting some of the paint dry, some of the glue dry. I really wouldn't let that put you off though, in terms of the finish that you can achieve. Okay, so pretty much one side left to do. As you can see, I'm not putting a great deal of thought into where some of this goes. It's just around, as I say, picking out some elements on the surface of the gaming table that are going to be reflected in the baseboard of the castle itself. Okay, so that's the front looking section. I'm just going to wipe off the brush. And in terms of final decoration, what I've got here are a range of tufts that I've been considering for the actual base itself. Different sizes. I've also got a section, excuse the noise, which are autumn tufts. So that last one is a gamer's grass. Some of these others are War Painter Scenics. The reason I've picked out this autumn colour is I'm really tempted to put some of this into the moat section. There we go. Just to give that sort of marshy effect. If you've watched my videos before, you'll see that I use these tufts quite a lot, and I'm actually quite pleased with that look. So I'm going to put some over there, bring this around. Maybe they should have been by the edge, but I think actually I'm going to be happy with this wherever they go. I've never used this liquid water before, so this is going to be an experience for me as well. But one of the other things I want to do is introduce some height to the foliage. And I've used these before on some figure bases where it's probably not as appropriate. Actually, do you know what? I'll take that and I'll put that there. And when I say it's not as appropriate, it's just that obviously on a model like this, you can easily get away with raising the height somewhat in terms of breaking up the overall look of the model. So I might stick with some of those being closer to the castle, and maybe just make a feature of them sort of clinging round the castle walls. Get a few more of these going. And again, I don't know how that's coming out on the video, but I'm beginning to see the effect of that breaking up the overall surface. And as you can see, I'm really just trying to introduce some elements that maybe, oops, and we've lost that little attempt there. So I think probably going a bit too quick. I'm very keen to see the overall effect of the castle at the moment. Let's take a couple of those, put that one in there. Oops. I'm just using a file obviously to push that in. Let's whiz around here, I'm not sure if I want anything on this side, but I'll have a little look for a slightly smaller piece. There we go. And pop that there. And again, just the idea here is that we're creating some height that might marry up a little bit more with the surface of the gaming table. I'm going to put those to one side, put these to one side, and then take a little look at these ones. I think these are probably 6mm tufts. And I'm going to go for some of these around the base as well, just again to help break up the surface, give an indication that there might be some grassy areas on the actual environment that the castle is placed in. And these tufts are self-adhesive. If you push them down, they will adhere quite nicely, and they were, for me, they're just one of those elements that really bring the base to life. Again, this is all personal, right? It's, if you make this model, make it the way that you want to. There's only one person you have to please, and that's yourself. It's nice if other people like it, and I hope you've enjoyed sticking with me during this sort of process. But ultimately, the idea is that you get the confidence to give it a go yourself, or something similar. If there are any sort of techniques, any questions that you've got, you think I might be able to help with, please add a comment. Of course, if you like the work I'm doing, and you'd like to show your support, then please subscribe, because it tells me that the information that I'm providing, or the videos that I'm introducing you to, are something that you find interesting and informative. So this one again is just a 2mm mid-green tuft, and again, hopefully you don't think this is a bit overkill. I'm beginning to think I'm going a bit tuft crazy here, but I'm quite enjoying the process of getting these onto the actual board. And although I'm going to be using it on this green surface in the main, there's also a chance that, you know, I'll take it somewhere or use it somewhere differently. And obviously having a little bit of contrast in it might allow it to blend in to different areas and different environments. I think I've just got stuck into the mode of, I've got the tufts out, they're in the hand, and we're and I'm happy putting them on. Bit sticky, but you know, that's their job. Right, okay. I think as well, when you've got grass, it helps to sort of put one of these on top of the flock to give that impression that some of the grass is not regular, if you see what I mean, as in certain areas are higher than others. And just stop in a moment and think I've achieved what I've set out to achieve. Okay, I think that's me going to stop there. Okay, so we're on to the next bit that is brand new for me. So this is the water kit from Woodland Scenics. It comes with an applicator brush, sponge really, and then the actual medium itself. Now I thought, because this is something that's been in my garage for a long time, I thought it had got ruined, as in this mixture doesn't appear to be flowing, but it does, and it's just incredibly slow moving. So what I'm hoping I can do is pop some of this into this area here on the model, and that it will over time find its way to the edges of our blue area and then pretty much stop, because we've got that raised area that I've created with the sand and the glue. So I've never opened this before, never used this before. Let's give it a go. I mean, that is actually really sticky, and I'm not sure that is how it's supposed to be. In fact, that definitely isn't how it's supposed to be. So I think my first fear is correct, that we have got a duff pot there. So I'm going to call a halt to that. I'm actually going to have to go and purchase one of these from the local model shop or equivalent. I shall do that and come back and let you know what it looks like. So I've decided on a plan B. If the liquid water isn't going to be usable, the local model shop is actually closed for the weekend. I'm going to try, I've just found this on the workbench, just an ordinary gloss varnish. This is a Vallejo version. And I'm going to try and recreate the liquid water with this glossy effect here. And I'm going to try and put quite a bit on to simulate depth of the water and hopefully get somewhere close to what I could have achieved with the proper liquid water mix itself. I've used varnish before, and to be honest, ordinary sort of tinned furniture varnish, and you can create quite a nice effect. Hopefully this will come somewhere close. And what I want to try and do is get into this sort of mossy area to make it look a little bit like weeds growing out of a depth of water, clearly. Now, whether this gives me quite the depth of finish or not, I don't know. But I don't tend to use gloss varnish, so this using quite a lot in this manner doesn't worry me. And as I said, I might find some gloss furniture varnish if this doesn't really give me the depth that I'm looking for. I'm a little bit worried about this bleed that I'm getting into the foliage, but we'll hopefully see that lessen off. And obviously I could go back and put some matte varnish on that. So maybe what I'll do is in this section, use the paintbrush to move it around a bit so that we're not quite as deep. Maybe pick up some of this over here. And see what the effect is after an hour or two of drying out. Round to the last section, and you notice that I'm not too bothered about this looking particularly blue. Any depth of still water, if you like, or pond or lake type water tends to certainly in deeper areas be quite dark. So I think this is actually more realistic in terms of coloration, and hopefully we'll get the effect that I'm looking for without doing a great deal more work. I'd like to show you guys the finished effect without too much without too much more of your time being taken up. This sort of air bubble effect is going to just disappear when the paint starts to dry. So that's all 3 sections I think that I've got on the model with this water effect. Probably gone too crazy over here because you can see that I've got a bit of bleed into this wood, this foliage area. Not too worried about that. In fact, what I might do right now is just take some of the blended turf and pop that on there very carefully while that's drying, just to make sure that if it does go a bit glossy and a bit sticky, we've got something in front of it which is, you know, taking advantage of that, soaking up that that gloss and not spoiling our overall effect. Okay, so yep, bit of drying, and I'll show you guys what the progress is a bit later. Here we are on the gaming table. As you can see, it's blended in fairly well with the backdrop, and certainly for gaming purposes this has turned out really well. I'll give you a couple of close-ups shortly, but I just thought it was worth showing you the overall effect, and hopefully you'll like the finished result. Thanks very much for joining me on this project. As you can see, I've now completed the castle. It's in situ. It's obviously as good as I'd hoped, I think. I've put some figures on the bases on the base just to show you an indication of scale, but if I move this camera in a little bit slowly, you can see that we've got some key features of the castle that have come out really well. Really pleased with the courtyard, the doors, pretty much everything is as I would have hoped. I think the thing to say about the base of the castle is that it's actually blending in a lot better than perhaps it might appear on camera, but you've seen the outside view. This is something that I think I'm going to be really pleased with in terms of our games. I certainly think it's going to make a great backdrop for our Test of Honor games, and hopefully this build has perhaps encouraged you to have a go yourselves. Again, if you like the sort of project that I've shown you, please hit the subscribe button. More than anything, it just tells me that you like the material, you like the kind of content that I'm producing, and hopefully we'll see you again some other time for another one of my videos. Thanks very much for watching, and good luck with your own projects.